What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we're going to go over my top 5 pass catchers for the Week 10 waiver wire. All of these players will be under 50% owned on ESPN leagues. Now, before we get into that, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like if you enjoyed the videos. Let's make this a quick hitter video. Let's get into this. Let's not waste any time. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm pretty cool. My nitty bag.
Now, first up on this list, let's talk about the man, the myth, the legend. A guy who is surprisingly available in over half of ESPN leagues. Wild. I mean, I get losing hope in him. I get it. But Brandon Aiyuk is my guy. And this week, he looked amazing. He set season highs in snap rate. He had a really good route rate. He had a really good target share. He set season highs in targets, catches, yards. He looked like the Aiyuk that I once knew, that I once told stories about. You know, the Aiyuk that I read in books. He had 8 targets, 7 catches, 8 targets, 6 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown. Was a top 12 wide receiver on the week. And I think the biggest part is with Brandon Aiyuk is that despite a bad fumble, he got open deep, he caught it, he went down to the ground, he came back up, Byron Murphy punches the ball out, bad fumble, and Kyle Shanahan could have said, you know what, you're done. You're done. You're not going back into the game. Doghouse it is for you. You fumbled, that's it. But he trusted Aiyuk, and on top of that, he played the highest snap share of the entire season, despite the fumble. So Kyle Shanahan, I think, is done with the doghouse stuff with Brandon Aiyuk. I think we are starting to get glimmers of the Brandon Aiyuk that we once knew. Now, am I saying that he is going to be top 24 wide receiver rest of season? No, but I have a lot of hope. He gives you one of the best upside wide receiver profiles of the entire waiver wire. Like, he's not a Tim Patrick or a Nelson Aguilar, or just, these veteran wide receivers that you hope and pray you get something out of. He is an ascending wide receiver. He is a year 2 wide receiver. A year 2 wide receiver I thought would break out. He still has that in his range of outcomes. He's in a high scoring offense. Maybe when Trey Lance comes in, it'll be a little bit better even, but still Aiyuk is a guy that I think is, a top 36 guy moving forward with tons of potential to be even more than that. Now, the second guy we're going to get into is Tim Patrick. Now, if you are, wondering, what kind of fab should I put on these players, all that, down below in the description, in the comments, I put on patreon.com/Ron Stewart. That's where I do my waiver wire article every single week. It comes out every Tuesday for $5. You get that. You get my rankings, all my other stuff, dynasty rankings, weekly rankings, rest of season rankings. You get I give up too much value for $5 a month on the Patreon. Now, with this waiver wire article, you get like my top 5, 10, 15 at every position, how much fab I would bid on them, like what percent of fab I would bid on each one of them, a little blurb, but kind of just what I feel about them moving forward. So make sure you go down below, check that out. Now, second up on this list is Tim Patrick. And I'm done disrespecting this guy. I'm done. He deserves to be rostered. Craziest part, he is literally wide receiver 28 on the entire season. Wide receiver 28, and he is owned in less than half of leagues. He put up 5 targets, 4 catches, 85 yards, and a touchdown. This week, he has 10 or more points in 6 out of his 9 games this season. He's been pretty wild. I think like weird take, but I think if you look at, I think he'd be the best wide receiver on the Lions, on the Saints. I think he'd be the best wide receiver. Who else has a really bad wide receiver room? Those might be the only 2 teams now that I think about it. I think he'd also be the best wide receiver maybe on the Raiders, but Renfro's really good. But you can do an exercise where you can sit there and say, like I said, the Saints, I think he'd be the best wide receiver on the Saints, the best wide receiver on the Lions. I think now with what's-his-name gone, with Calvin Ridley gone, he'd be the best wide receiver on the Falcons. Nonetheless, he's a really underrated wide receiver. And like I said, I'm done sleeping on him. But that's about it. That's all I have, is that he's a wide receiver 28. He's done well in a couple of games. There's not a lot of evidence moving forward that he's going to be great because, Noah Fant's coming back. Jerry Jeudy's finally getting into his groove, but he keeps performing. So I think that he deserves to be rostered in leagues as a decent flex type play, which brings us to our third pass catcher on this list, and it's Rashod Bateman. Again, looking really promising, and I love this guy as a prospect. One of those really, purebred type prospects I put up on the screen on the top 10 lessons videos, but he is one of those. He has a very similar prospect profile to a CeeDee Lamb, where these guys come in as a freshman, They break out, and then they continue to dominate over their entire 3-season stretch. He was a first-round pick I really, really like Rashod Bateman. He is a really strong prospect. I had him as my wide receiver 2 during the draft process. Now, he saw yesterday some really encouraging work. He saw a career high, or a career high because he's a rookie, a career high in snap percentage, route percentage, and he had 8 targets. Now, he didn't, get crazy output with that. I want to say he only had like 50 receiving yards on like maybe 6 catches. But these rookies, we know they get better as the season goes on, and the Ravens are 6th highest in neutral pass rate. So they're no longer this team that's just going to, run the ball between the tackles and just kind of chew out games. Now, is that because, they want to pass more and they have the pass catchers? Or is that because they are using Devonta Freeman and Le'Veon Bell in run plays? Probably the latter. But actually, hold on. Let me pause this real quick. Let me see how much Rashod Bateman had this week. So yeah, he had 5 catches for 52 yards, I believe, which isn't anything crazy, but it's the peripherals, right? It's the targets, it's the routes, it's the snaps. They keep climbing up. The efficiency will eventually be there on a team that is passing the ball a lot more than people thought they would. Now, when I said 6th highest neutral pass rate, I believe that's the last. That's from week 6, 7, 8, and 9. So as of recently, they've been passing a lot in neutral game scripts. I believe that Rashod Bateman, as the season goes on, has a lot of upside to come out here and be an absolute stud. Which brings us to our next wide receiver on this list, Michael Gallup. And he's on pace to suit up next week. There's not much peripherals here. They just had a disappointing game, the Cowboys against the Broncos. We have Amari Cooper, who has had a strained hamstring since he was a senior in high school. And then you have CeeDee Lamb, who had like an ankle injury last week. He's a little bit on the thinner side. Both of those guys, it wouldn't shock me at all if they missed games here and there. Michael Gallup has a top 24 finish at wide receiver season on his resume in year 2. He looked really good in year 2. Last year didn't pan out because of, CeeDee Lamb came in, Dak Prescott got hurt. But he has this really nice role as I would call him like a handcuff wide receiver. He's one of the very few. There are very few wide receivers where they are handcuffs to their wide receiver or the wide receivers in front of them where, if Deontay Johnson or Juju go down, Chase Claypool gets a huge bump up. If Amari Cooper or CD go down, Michael Gallup gets a huge bump up. So Michael Gallup is a nice flex play on a high-scoring offense, on any given day. But if Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb miss any time, he was instantly a top 24 option for that week. So that like little backdoor hidden value that he has is huge in my eyes with all the injuries that have been going on in the NFL, which then brings us to Elijah Moore. And where's Elijah Moore's little thing? And I love Elijah Moore. He was my wide receiver 4 in this class. He's really, really strong in terms of just from a prospect perspective. He broke out as a freshman. He's looked really good. Or no, he broke out as a sophomore, but his sophomore season, in terms from college dominator rating, it goes toe-to-toe with Devonta Smith's dominator rating Heisman season. Now, that's just like the market share of receiving yards and touchdowns in your offense. Obviously, he didn't put up the same amount of counting stats, but in terms of the market share of his receiving yards in that offense, he was absolutely dominant. And this week he comes out, he puts up 7 catches, 84 yards, and 2 touchdowns, had a massive week. And the problem is that I love Elijah Moore. The reason why I wouldn't say that he's somebody you need to go head over heels for, because of the Jets. And I love the Jets. They're my favorite team. But the way that they've been using their wide receivers makes no sense. Denzel Mims has seen a lot of routes these last 2 weeks, ever since Corey Davis went down. And it makes no sense at all because Denzel Mims was somebody that was barely even hanging on to a roster spot in the summer. He comes in, they're not using him. They're not peppering him with targets, Denzel Mims. They're just like rotating wide receivers. They rotate a lot of wide receivers. They bring in Denzel Mims. They bring in Braxton Berrios, Keelan Cole, who honestly, Keelan Cole and Braxton Berrios aren't bad. They're really good wide receiver 4 and wide receiver 5s, but there's no reason that Elijah Moore is playing like less than 50% of the routes in a given game. This is a really good stat from Context Matters. Dwayne McFarland, he's really, really sharp. He said Elijah Moore hasn't eclipsed 65% of routes in 3 weeks, but has wide receiver 36, wide receiver 26, and wide receiver 1 finishes, which is insane. And his targets per out run is 24%, and his yards per out run is 1.89 in those games. 22% targets per out run for the season is tied with Jalen Waddle. So here's the problem. He's commanding targets at a really high rate on a per route basis. The problem is that he's not running enough routes to be extremely fantasy relevant, which makes no sense. It makes no sense. I mean, like, here's the thing, though. We have the Cordell Patterson lesson learned that we had is a player gets a certain amount of volume. If he plays really well, he can earn more volume in the future. And that's kind of the bet you're placing with Elijah Moore, is that the efficiency is going to pay off to the point where they start letting him run more routes. He's going to command a bunch of targets. He's going to be really good. He's a really, really strong wide receiver prospect. He has shown up to be really good in his small samples. Just needs to run more routes. Now, I will say, The Jets offense is also a little bit on the up and up here. Ever since LaFleur went up, so LaFleur is the offensive coordinator. It's a little bit of a boomer take by me, circled around by Jets media, but LaFleur went up into the box, the booth, whatever it's called, upstairs, was calling the plays, seeing the entire field. He's been really good since he did that. They scored a bunch of points. They had the Mike White game against the Bengals. They scored 35 on the Colts, who have a really good defense. And they also have the third highest neutral pass rate since week 6. We want teams that pass the ball a lot. If you pass the ball a lot, then you are generally a more sharp play caller. You're better. He's also been looser with the playbook, been more creative. So I really like this offense moving forward. It's like a sneaky, garbage time, negative game scripts, pass the ball a ton, score some points. So they have a lot of potential. Again, it just comes down to Elijah Moore earning more routes. But if you can add him on that, speculation that his routes could go up, I really, really like Elijah Moore going forward. Now we have 4 honorable mentions. The first one is Donovan Peoples-Jones. The problem with Donovan Peoples-Jones is that I think he's a best ball guy or like a DFS guy. Never am I starting him on my flex and feeling really good about it because he doesn't get a lot of volume. He had a huge day this week. I think he finished as a top 12 wide receiver on literally 2 catches. He had that huge streak down the field. Baker Mayfield caught him. He ran it for a touchdown. It was huge. And I guess that, he becomes interesting with no Odell Beckham there, but because he's never going to get, a healthy amount of targets, I don't love him, but I think that he's a decent add because maybe he can develop into more than a 2, 3, 4 target guy in a given game. He was a 5-star recruit coming to Michigan. He has a really nice prospect profile. He's just never been a guy that has commanded a ton of targets. Then we have Russel Gage, who just led the team with 8 targets. And when Calvin Ridley wasn't there, what was it? Russell Gage played really well. I want to see when Julio wasn't there last year. Now, Pitts kind of replaces Julio, but last year when Julio wasn't there, Russell Gage was, I wouldn't say really good, but he was solid. He was giving you flex production. He led all wide receivers this week with 8 targets on the Falcons. He is now the wide receiver 1 after, Pitts obviously being the tight end / wide receiver 1. But after that, it's Russell Gage. The next highest wide receiver only had 3 targets. So Russell Gage isn't a bad, flex stash when you're, kind of desperate at wide receiver. Then we have 2 tight ends, one being Logan Thomas. He's coming back from his injury. He should be ready to go very soon. I want to say this week he's going to play. And I talked about him in my rest of season video where I talked about rest of season league winners. He's one of those guys because he has been really solid at tight end. Last year he finished as a top 5, top 8 guy. And this year he has a really good playoff schedule. I believe that he plays the Eagles twice. I talked about this in that video. He plays the Eagles twice. Both of them are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. He plays the Cowboys once during that playoff schedule. They're allowing the 8th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. So he's getting 5th most, 8th most, 5th most as his last 3 games. He has a lot of potential to boom in those weeks. And then we have Dan Arnold as our last must-add pass catcher. Urban Meyer loves his tight ends. Doesn't matter if it's Tim Tebow, if it's James O'Shaughnessy, whoever it is out there, he's targeting them. He led the team in targets again. He had a startable stat line. Dan Arnold is a top 15 tight end moving forward. Now that's going to do it for us today, fellas. If you want access to my entire waiver wire article, it'll be down below in the description. It'll be in the comments, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to eat some dinner. I'm going to watch the Monday Night Football game. I'm going to enjoy my Sunday night. I'm going to come out tomorrow, firing on all cylinders, giving you guys a nice trade target video for Wednesday. Now, with that being said, I love you guys. Subscribe, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice. 10-0, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena from Mr. Meaner.